on the front pant. So you can see here that I've drawn out both sides of my tuck, and I am just going to fold it along these lines, pin it in place, and then sew along that line, really close to the edge, creating that little tuck. So it should look like this, and then you're going to sew basically all the way straight down. So once you've sewn your tuck, it should look like this from the inside and the outside. And now we're going to attach our pocket facing, and we want to make sure we're matching up all of our notches and our dots along the seam. And we're basically going to be sewing from the top down to somewhere around here where that little dot is. So don't sew all the way down to the side because you do not need to, and we're going to turn it after. With your facing sewn to your front pant, give that a good press. Turn it to the inside. And give it another good press. Then we're going to top stitch right along this edge. Okay, with our facing top stitched all the way down, it should look like this. We're going to attach the other side of the pocket, and we're going to sew it right sides together along this straight seam that turns into a little curve right here, right where we meet these notches. And we're going to sew that with a 5/8 seam allowance. Now, once your pocket is sewn together, we're going to top stitch the pocket in place at the top here and down here at the bottom, so it holds its shape when we're sewing the back pant together. Okay, so now all of the prep work that we have to do on our front pant is done, so we can bring over our back pant piece, and we're going to pin it right sides together from the crotch all the way down to the hem. And sew that in place with a 5/8 seam allowance. Now for this one, I like to press the seam flat and open. So we're going to do that and then repeat all of those steps with the other front and back pant. Okay, so now we have one pant leg here, and we're going to bring over the other one, laying them right sides together, matching up this inner crotch seam, making sure we're matching all of our notches and this inner seam, and all the way from the back down to the front. And when sewing this, we're going to sew straight all the way down, and instead of going around this curve here, we're going to sew straight up instead, following this stitch line here. Okay, so at this point, it is starting to look like pants. You can see here we have sewn up all the way along this crotch seam. And now we're going to press this fly to the left side if you're looking at the wrong side of your fabric. We're also going to press the rest of the seam that we did sew, so it has a nice clean finish. Now we're going to bring this over to our machine, and we're going to top stitch along this yoke that we drew out. So now we're going to bring this back over to our machine, and we're going to top stitch along the lines that we drew here. All right, so once that detail is sewn down, you can see that it creates the illusion that there is a fly here, and on the inside, it's nice and stitched flat. So now we're going to turn this inside out, and we're going to sew the front to the back along the side seams. I'm getting close. Okay. Sides. Okay, so again, we're going to be sewing down the outside of the pant, down one leg, and then repeating that on the other side. Okay, we have pants. So now we're going to turn these right side out and get a good look at them. All right, and now we're going to set them aside for just a second while we sew up the waistband. So bring those two pieces over, and we're going to sew them right sides together along the short sides here. Nose in place. And then we're going to sew these with a 5/8 seam allowance.
What distinguishes Indian food is its magical use of spices.
So I accidentally skipped a step. Don't be like me. We need to apply our grommets before sewing our two pieces together, but I'm just going to go back in and fix that now, so don't make the same mistake I did. And I'm just going to install a small piece of interfacing before I apply my grommets, just to make sure they don't move around a ton. And to apply my grommets, I'm going to be using my cam snap press, which is this big guy here. Okay, so now that my grommets are installed, we can continue with sewing the band. So I'm going to trim off some of this excess seam allowance. I'm going to give it another good press just to make sure it's nice and crisp. Now we're going to fold this in half and give it a light press. Bring our pant back over, and now we're going to attach it to the top of the pant. And we're going to do this right sides together, making sure that our grommets are going to be on the outside of the pant once it's sewn together. Pin that in place, and we're going to match up all of our notches and our seams, pin it in place. And then once this is done, all we have left to do is add in the elastic and our tie, hem the bottom, and we are done. All right, so now that it's all pinned, you want to double check that things are where you want them to be, nice and centered, and then sew it in place with a 5/8 seam allowance. And then of course we're going to do our reinforcement stitch right below it. Once you have your full waistband sewn in place, we're going to insert the elastic through the gap that we left there. So we're going to bring over our elastic guide, bring over our elastic, and measure it to the length that we need. I left my paper a little long, so I'm just going to trim all of that off. And now we're going to insert it into the waistband. And for this, I like to use a bodkin that looks like this. So I'll grab the end of my elastic, push that down, and insert it all the way around. Okay, once you have all of your elastic sewn through, you don't want to sew it together like this. You want to make sure that you're overlapping the two ends of the elastic so it lays flat when it's sewn into the waistband. So bring that over to your machine, sew that in place, and then we're going to close up the hole that we left here to bring the elastic through. Then we're going to grab our cording, and we're going to insert it into one end of the grommets, through the back, if I can. Almost. Okay. Out through the other side. And I left mine super long right now. I do have to trim them down, but I like to put them in long, tie it in a bow to see exactly where I want it, and then trim it afterwards. So that way I don't end up with a weird, short little bow. So I'll probably trim it to like right here and then add these little tips back on to the point where I cut them. But for now, we're going to do the final step and hem up the bottom of the pants. And I'm just going to fold mine up by 1/2 inch, clip it in place, and then sew it down. So again, I'm just going to sew that in place it up. Do the same thing with the other leg, and then I'm going to try it on. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this pattern, you might like my other spring design, number M8446. So check it out and see you next time.